I don't know whether you guys can see or not. What sort of layers have we got? And that's about your rotary hoe. Was it rotary hoe here?
Yeah, I would say 10-15 centimetres for the rotary hoe, plus you do get some soil addition on top because you've got a wet drip line, and when the wind blows, the sandy topsoil tends to pile up on top. So
yep. All right.
The cultivation level, I reckon.
I mean, we described it, we called one a bit about there, but it's partly, also partly where the wetness from the drippers probably go as well. And then another one round about here, we started to get even more calcareous material. Yeah, and this one here, it's a bit hard to see, but there is actually quite a bit of a different sort of soil down the bottom here that's coming out as well. And so when you actually, the three textures on this one, I'll hand them around perhaps. So, you know, sandy loam.
This is the top layer.
Well, a little bit more, perhaps a light sandy clay loam, that one. And then when we get down the bottom, there's a decent clay there. So certainly, yeah, increasing. In some ways similar to the last one, but the other big difference on this one, I suppose, is how much lime there is in the profile. There's a lot more lime in this profile than where we were before. And you can sort of see there's nodules and things through here in places. And even sort of, you know, getting quite a good fizz even up the top there. You know, once you get down here, it'll take off more. So yeah, so it's sort of very high. Who was asking about the fizzes down there, but even up here, you're still getting a high fizz there. So it's still quite a bit of lime, pretty well right through the profile. The only place that may not fizz is right down the bottom, but I think that'll probably fizz too. Yeah, well, there you go. Definitely did fizz. So you know, it's basically telling you, yeah, certainly a lot more limes through the profile, and in some ways it's a bit more alkaline again. The lime's pH 8.4, I suppose, is normally with lime, but when you're starting to get sort of pHs up over 9, often it's sodium bicarbonate that's driving it, not calcium carbonate, and that can sort of go up to about pH 10. And I suppose with these little kits, one of the problems is trying to tell the difference between about 8.5 and 10. But it certainly just gives you an idea, and it's all, actually I could do it down here, it might be easier. She's all pretty well purple all the way down and getting purpler. Now some of the other things I suppose to look at with this one, the roots, like you can see, really good root growth, pretty well through to about, around about 80 I suppose on that one, and some real bulges of roots in places which I think your drip lines are, where are they, Nigel? One's about there, isn't it?
Yeah,
so sort of a bulge there.
There's one running along.
Yep.
Where it would be, in about the same distance.
Yeah, so
on the other side.
you got one here which is a bit different, but certainly another bulge sort of sitting underneath where the water and the nutrients are going in this profile. But also, yeah, quite deep. There's roots. I mean, there's got a decent root down, even a metre deep there. They are sort of going out either side of the pit too, so that they're around the place, you know, getting away from just. But there's certain bulges, certainly under the drippers, I suppose, to some extent. So I suppose looking at, this is the soil pit 2, I think, in your notes there. So when you're going across, and we'd actually, in terms of, I suppose, the classification, we've called this one a deep calcareous soil. So it says a calcareous soil by definition. And the lab data, which is on the page after, just running through the lab data. So in terms of pHs, sort of the lab pH is 8.1, 8.7, and once you get to about 100, which is about where the roots pack up, you don't see too many roots under 100, you know, your pH is up to 9.8, so it's actually getting really alkaline at that depth. Nitrate, a little bit of nitrate, but not quite sure, yeah, why we didn't get more, but when we tested it, that's what we got. If you look across through the EC 1 to 5, you know, you use a figure of, well, I've used 0.4 or even 0.2 in some of the hort crops. So yeah, it is getting a little bit salty from about 100 centimetres down. and that's basically reflected a bit in that as well. Going across, chlorides are okay. The organic carbon 0.74 here in the surface. Now, last time we were 0.3 or something at that last site, but remember how many tonnes of organic matter did you stick in here?
10 tonnes for a start.
Yeah, so that's 10 tonnes per hectare, which means it's got
70 tonnes per hectare in the tree row.
70 tonnes in this point, so it should go up a bit. And the phosphorus buffering index 29, so a little bit lower in that sandier stuff, but picking up as it goes down the profile. The phosphorus buffering index, the calcareous nature influences a little bit, but it's not really a test designed for calcareous soils. It's designed for aluminium and iron tie-up. So the figures they get in the eastern states, where they get figures of 400 or 500, we don't tend to get on calcareous soils, even though you might be having as much tie-up. It's not really designed for that process. Available phosphorus 23. I said I'd sort of normally target 30 to 50, so it's not excessively high. It's probably a fraction low. Potassium around 140 in the surface, but picking up once you get down the profile a bit, which is sort of interesting. We haven't picked up more of that out of your compost. So I would have thought that would be one of the things that's in there. Sulphur was a fraction low, and this one, the trace elements, the copper's only just above. I'm not sure. Do you spray copper sprays out on almond trees? Yeah, so whether it's just, this is all new country, it wasn't in.
It was in cereals.
In cereals, so it may just not have had enough to build that up yet. But it's still okay from a growth viewpoint, as are sort of zinc and manganese. The other subsoil issues that you see on this one, once we get down to here, the boron is actually at toxic levels. It's at 17. I talked about 15 for wheat plants, but we actually talk about 4 for horticultural plants, so it's actually quite a bit higher than what you'd want. And I suppose another reason perhaps the roots stop about where they are. And looking at the cations, which are okay, we are starting to see that the sodicity build up in that layer, I suppose, as the salt has built up. And I should do a quick test on that. Sorry. Say that again. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's the reason the water's...
Yeah, and so we are picking up, like when you handed that texture around, that's a pretty reasonable sort of clay, that one. Did you feel as it went around? So there's a bit more meat in it. And so we sort of debate how far you're above things like Blanchetown clay on this one, I suppose. But so the drainage at the bottom is not as good, so you're collecting more of that stuff, I suppose. Hopefully I'll get the bit with this acid there, Rebecca. So in terms of the salinity, certainly compared to up the hill, where we've actually looked at things like Blanchetown clay in the mallee, actually the clay can be like 10 metres down on top of a sandhill, but then as you get into the hollows, it might only be a couple of metres. So it sort of almost runs a bit on a plane, but the soil's sort of going up and down above it. So again, the reason that where they tend to get their water tables will be down in the lower points.
Watering from up on the dune also
Run. Well, I wouldn't have thought so. Do you ever get runoff down?
Haven't seen surface runoff, no, but the lower swales tend to be wetter for longer.
Yeah,
So
they just hold. Yeah. And certainly one of the other things that Jeff Q did calculate the water holding capacities for these profiles, and this one he actually came up with a total water holding capacity of 81 millimetres. So that's basically saying if you had 81 mils, you're filling up the root zone. But for horticulture, they often use what they call readily available water holding, which is a lower pressure difference. So it's not going fully out to wilting point; it's just going out to 60 kPa's instead of 1500 kPa's. And for this profile, it's calculated at 40. Now, with this one, you can certainly see, where those roots start to pack out. So you think, that there's a limitation there. That's where you're growing your plants, is sort of above that. And I'm assuming this, most of you guys would have had soil surveys done of certainly the almond blocks that you're involved in, and that's sort of how they calculate that. I suppose those readily available water maps or unit maps is looking basically at where they think the roots go to and calculating the figure. Any other comments?
Is that
25 to 45 layer that is phosphate buffering index is higher.
Yeah, yep. I think it's,
Is that due to the calcium?
yeah, there's more lime coming in at that layer, and I think, yeah, you seem to get, the PBI seems to get into the hundreds with lime, but it doesn't go several hundred like you do on a high iron soil or something in the eastern states. And so it's sort of a bit, it's not quite designed for South Australian soils, and because certainly once you're getting 10% lime in there, you'd say it's a soil that's probably going to fix a fair bit of phosphorus. Yeah.
And I believe the cation exchange is high in that layer again.
Yeah.
Because it may be due to that high organic matter they have put in sort of, I believe.
The second layer, it's actually a little bit artificial, because we haven't done a pre-wash. You're probably picking up the calcium in the lime.
And what about the contribution of the organic matter instead?
Yeah, well, I think the organic matter's probably more in this top one, I would have thought, but yeah.
The initial one, you haven't put any initial one here?
Any initial what, sorry?
Any compost?
Just that deep, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just that. It was just 10 to 10 centimetres in the tree row, once off, and then the application on each side. So this has had an initial treatment.
Well, you can actually see some of it there, almost, can't you? All right, so I suppose, to me, the difference, say, to the previous one, a lot more lime through the profile, and we're picking up these sort of deep subsoil constraints on this one, which you're picking up with the sort of high salt, ESP, boron, reflecting probably if we kept going down there, the drainage is stopping and all that stuff's been going down through the profile and stopped, if that makes sense. All right, and I suppose, but a lot of soils like this, and a lot of vines and things growing on this sort of country too. So it's not. I'm not sure whether there is, rootstocks that are more tolerant of subsoil constraints. Anyone know that? Well, certainly vines are, right?
No, there would be.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. So if you're in this part of the thing, in theory, you'd be looking at something that's got a bit more tolerance to some of those subsoil constraints, and your grapevines there certainly are rootstocks that are more suited to where there's a little bit of salt in the profile and things. Yeah.
What is sodic, perhaps, or somewhat swaking?
Yeah. So I suppose it did have a high ESP, so in theory it should disperse, and it's if you sort of look at it on a dark night, you'd probably think it has. But
It's a little bit milky around the, around the slump.
But it hasn't much. And I suppose that's right. One of the problems you have with ESPs on soils that have got a bit of salt in them is are you reading just the sodicity from on the exchange, or you're getting some contamination from the salt?
Is it a high percent of a small amount, or is it sort of over 6 of a large amount? Because it's a pretty sandy soil.
Yeah, not down there though. That's from the bottom. So that's the clay. Yeah. All right. The question that's asked in there, I think it's an interesting one too. Would you expect to see a response on this site? I suppose. Is it something that's got enough limitations that your compost and your mulch are going to add something to the soil, or is it setting hard enough? It's sort of not really.
I think if it had no fertiliser added, you'd definitely get a response. But like Nigel was saying in the report, if they're feeding it enough through the drippers, then it doesn't really need the nutrition from the compost.
Yeah, so the roots have sort of gone, like that, haven't they? I'm not sure. It'd be interesting whether there's any out in the middle of the row. I don't know. Very little. Yeah.
We've done some work every now and then, and sort of had to dig a trench through the row, and there's very little.
Yeah.
Hardly any tree roots at all.
Yeah, so they are sort of living in that bit.
It's just dry, except for the sprinkle box.
Yep. Yeah.
There's also machinery going up and down here, so it doesn't
But I suppose the other, I don't know, moment there's plenty of water in the Murray too, isn't it? But whether there'll be years when you've got to fight for your water a bit more, I don't know. In almonds, as it's coming and the price of grapes comes up or something or other, and they're flogging all the water. Yeah, because my experience in the Barossa with the mulch is it's the dry years they see the big differences, and they only put out smidgens of water. As a dry use, you see much bigger difference in the wet use. Looked at that in terms of what you're taking off. Like, it'd be interesting. Done a nutrient balance.
I haven't done the nutrient product removal. I mean, it's easy enough to do so.
Yeah.
I think the thing is to feed the tree and produce the yield rather than actually balance the nutrient budget. So that would be an interesting exercise.
That would be really interesting to see on the basis of how much you are actually getting from the organic matter versus.
I mean,
Clearly, if you're taking off more than you're putting in.
Yeah, well, I mean, 2 or 3 tons of kernels plus the associated hulls and so on.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how much nutrients is that going to?
You mean in the hull?
Yeah, in the hulls and nuts. Is that an unreasonable question?
The hull has about 2.4% potassium. I mean, potassium is the highest, you know, the nutrient in that. And yeah, and then I mean, anyway, so it has about 2.4. Nitrogen is nothing much, you know, just about 0.4, something like that. And phosphorus, calcium is about high too, about 1%.
Okay.
Potassium is close to 3%, yeah, close to
Right,
3% in hull.
So 3% times about 3 or 4 tons, that's what, 100, 120 kilograms per hectare?
Yeah. So it's not much internal potassium, it's in hull.
In the hull, okay.
That's because I think that's one of the points, isn't it? Like, yeah, you've got to you don't just put it on top of everything else. You actually got to adjust the other inputs to get the value out of it. Otherwise, it's expensive for nothing. Yeah, and that goes for water as well, probably.